making a mark on film and fashion, Hollywood icon Audrey Hepburn has become an inspiration to the generations that followed her, including myself. And that includes her granddaughter, Emma Hepburn Ferrer. Emma joins us now to talk about keeping her grandmother's memory alive. Thank you so much for joining us, Emma, and welcome to the Philippines. What are your first impressions on the Philippines? This is your first trip here.
It is. It's really culturally very, very intriguing to me. There's so many layers of history and various cultures that have been here, and so it's been fascinating. It's my first time in Southeast Asia in general.
Wow.
So yeah, it's really
and
amazing.
Of course, you're also here with your father,
yes.
and launching Intimate Audrey,
yes.
which is an exhibit about your Lola. That's how they call
yes,
them here in Manila, in Tagalog.
Yes.
So share with us, Emma, what stories about your grandmother were passed on to you by your dad, your mom, that you will always cherish?
Well, I think I've gotten this question a lot, more than a particular anecdote. You know, everyone wants to know what are the family secrets and stories that only you know. I think it's more the image of someone who, as much as people believed she was kind and generous, she was like that 20 times more when you met her in person. So when she would be on set, she would be cooking pasta for the whole crew on her breaks, or if you were to stay in her home, you know, she would bring you fresh flowers to wake you up every morning. And she was just such a golden, selfless person, which I think, you know, I've heard little bits and pieces from people that knew her personally, and they say that really there was just no one like her. So it's that image of her that I think I've really absorbed and that I hope to carry on.
She was a very thoughtful individual and a woman with a golden heart.
Yes.
And if you got to meet your grandmother, what questions would you like to ask her?
I mean, I think that to me, having worked with UNICEF in recent years like she did, and really learning about her history living through the war and how that shaped her as a person, and how it was really the catalyst that brought her into humanitarian work, because not a lot of people know she lived through World War II and was a refugee of war herself, and it was actually the predecessors of UNICEF. It was an organization assembled by the League of Nations that pulled her out of a literal famine when she was living in Holland. And so, you know, I would just love to be able to have those kinds of conversations, you know, with my grandmother and what she lived through, which to so many people in my generation today, it's kind of foreign, you know, to understand what that would have been like for those generations.
And of course, you are carrying on the humanitarian legacy of your grandmother. You've become also a spokesperson for UNICEF and an ambassador for the United Nations Human Rights Commission.
For the High Commissioner for Refugees.
For refugees.
Yes.
And how active are you?
So I was living in America, in New York, up until about 2 years ago, and I was extremely active with UNICEF. I've traveled all over the United States, really telling that story that I just told you, and helping people understand what it means for me and my family to carry on this notion of legacy, which isn't something that to me is solely related to the fact of having a famous grandmother. It's, as I said, you know, someone who lived through war, and I feel I've been reflecting on this in recent days. People in the Philippines can also understand that from their prior generations of occupation and of war, and so telling people that is what legacy means to me and my family, and that story. So it's very meaningful work for me.
But being Audrey Hepburn's granddaughter, could it also be a source of stress, or really just an inspiration?
Well, it's an inspiration. It's a responsibility in a good way, you know, in the best of ways. That's what I always like to say. It's because it's not, you know, it's not something that's just about me or my father or about even her. It's about this notion of what is legacy and what does it mean, you know, for a family to see something, a story that's worth telling and carry that on. So it's a responsibility.
It is indeed a big responsibility. And of course, everybody knows your grandmother for some very famous films like this one, Breakfast at Tiffany's. I even have her Funko Pop where she plays the character of Holly Golightly. And of course, there's also Funny Face and Roman Holiday and Sabrina. Personally, I'm sure you've watched a lot of, or not all the films.
Not all of them.
Not all of them. What have you missed so far?
Oh gosh, there were things like Two for the Road that I've never seen. I mean, sort of more, you know, arty films that, I mean, none of them were arty films, but films that I haven't seen the entire repertoire yet. But in recent years, I've really come to appreciate more films where she had a very serious role and where she really embodied the person she was playing, like A Nun Story or Wait Until Dark. I mean, she has a range of characters.
She's a very versatile actress. But among the films that you've seen of your grandmother, which was your favorites? Maybe at least a top 2 or top 3.
Yeah, in my heart, Funny Face always has a place, really. It was the first film that I saw when I was a child, and I think I was sort of understanding what it meant to have a famous grandmother, and I saw this explosion of color and fashions in Paris, and I was just like, I was as blown away, I think, as anyone else. So that always has a special place in my heart. But as I've said, other films like A Nun Story, you know, where she embraces these roles, and she went to live with Franciscan nuns for, you know, months leading up to it, and really studied and kind of method acting. Now, as you know, as an artist myself, and later, and sort of as the years have gone by, I've really grown to appreciate those as well.
Your grandmother also had a lot of leading men in her movies. Who would be your favorite? Who would be your favorite? Who would be the favorite leading man of your grandmother from the movies that you've seen?
I think I have to stay loyal to Funny Face and Fred Astaire, just because he's so wonderful, and you know, it's such a how do I say this? Their relationship is so pure, and it's not so sexualized on screen, and I think that's quite interesting, and you know, the dancing, and I adore him, so it would have to be him for me.
And how important is this exhibit that has been going the world over? Intimate Audrey, for people to remember your grandmother not only as an actress, a fashion icon, but also a humanitarian advocate. I
think that this exhibition is unique, and my father has done exhibitions in the past that were very focused around objects and memorabilia. And you know, a question that he's asked himself, which I think is very valid, is how and why do we continue to remember her? And I think that this exhibition, which has over 800 photographs in 800 square meters of space, so it's very rich in, you know, visual imagery. I think that is really the lasting relationship that most people in the world have access to: her films, her photographs, her voice. And so I think that seeing this exhibition, for me, it was incredibly moving, because there might, you know, even before she was born, family members and ancestors of mine, but for anyone, I think, walking through the door, they really get a chance to sort of be on this path of her life with her from the beginning to the end, which started out, you know, as a young child before the war broke out, and ended as she became a humanitarian.
And of course, a lot of people will know your grandmother, Audrey Hepburn, especially the baby boomers like myself. You also have the Gen X. And then, of course, maybe some of the millennials, right? And now, this exhibit happens in the Gen Z generation. What in Audrey Hepburn's personal traits do you think is relevant to the Gen Zs?
I mean, if I had a simple answer, I would give it, because it really is a question that my father has asked himself, and I've really started to wonder why. I think that well, first of all, I think that the stories that she told on screen were quite timeless, and I think that those live on. But I think as a person, she represented a simplicity, which I think is lacking today, especially in the celebrity-heavy culture of glam and, you know, of sort of this excess notion of celebrity. And so I think that people even subconsciously react to that, and they see something that is more toned down and more streamlined and more about the person, about, you know, the actions rather than about the image. I mean, it's about both, but I think people react to that, and I think that that is meaningful, especially in the world that we're living in today.
We're really very proud of you, Emma, and what you have achieved.
Thank you.
And continuing the legacy
Yeah.
of your Lola, your grandmother,
Yes.
worldwide.
Yes.
Emma Hepburn Ferrer, Audrey Hepburn's granddaughter, joining us on The Final Word.
Thank you.
Indeed, a great honor.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here in the Philippines. Thank you.